The school board clerk called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her name is Rosa Alvarez. She never calls during my shift. She said, "Arthur, you need to come to the board meeting Thursday." I asked her why. She said, "Just come. Wear your good jacket. Sit in the back." Then she hung up. I stood in the boiler room holding a dead phone. Something in my gut went tight. I didn't know it yet. That call would change everything. Welcome back to The Forgotten Father. Grab your coffee. Get comfortable. Remember this, the people in these stories had every chance to do right by the ones who raised them. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment. Be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to stay till the end. My name is Arthur Kessler. I'm 71 years old. I live in a small house outside Springfield, Missouri. Been here my whole life. Never wanted to be anywhere else. I've driven the same faded blue Buick since 2003. I wear a Navy custodian's uniform with my name stitched above the pocket. My pocket knife has a cracked handle I never replaced. Some things you keep on purpose. For 38 years, I've been the head custodian at Ridgeview High School. I started as a janitor's helper at 19. I worked my way up slow, one mopped hallway at a time. I mop the halls. I fix the boilers. I know every squeaky locker in that building by sound alone. Walk up to me in the parking lot. You'd hand me a lost umbrella, not a school district budget. That's exactly how I like it. Quiet men get underestimated. Underestimated men get to watch everything. There's a teacher's aide named Rosa who's worked here nearly as long as I have. She calls me the mayor of the basement because everybody comes to me eventually anyway. A jammed door, a leaking pipe, a student who needs someone quiet to talk to. I helped Rosa's son get his first job here, quietly, years back. She's never forgotten it. Rosa is the closest thing this school has to an early warning system. If something's wrong in this district, Rosa knows before the memo goes out. My son David became the district's new superintendent 4 years ago. David came from a business consulting firm, not a classroom. He climbed fast inside the district office. Within 2 years, he was running the whole system. He wears a tailored suit to school board meetings. He calls me Dad in a tone that sounds like he's doing me a favor. David was 8 when I taught him to read using the same battered dictionary I still keep on my shelf. He sat on my lap in that boiler room, sounding out words, watching my finger move under each line. He asked me once why I never wanted a job upstairs, in an office. I told him some men are needed exactly where they already are. He said that made sense to him. He was 8. It made more sense to him then than it seems to make to him now. It started small, with David. At Thanksgiving 2 years back, he asked me to park my Buick around the side lot because it didn't fit the image for a district photo shoot. I moved it. Nobody else at that table saw anything wrong with that. At his own daughter's christening last spring, he introduced me to the district's finance officer as my dad, still sweeping floors at 71. I let it pass. A man doesn't build a life-keeping score on family gatherings. At Christmas, David mentioned, in front of the whole family, that he'd always wondered why a man could work a school for 38 years and never move past a mop bucket. My wife Doris's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I told him some men aren't looking to move past what they're good at. He said, "Sure, Dad," in the tone of a man agreeing with a child. I let it go. I never minded being underestimated by David. Not until the district's centennial assembly. Ridgeview High turns 100 years old this year. The district planned a big assembly, TV cameras, the whole community invited. I wasn't seated with the honored guests, not officially. I was there because Rosa told me to come. I stood near the back in my Navy uniform, name patch straight on my chest, a program booklet in my hand. David took the podium around 2 o'clock. He thanked the school board. He thanked the state representative. Then he gestured toward the back of the gym, right at me. He said, "And let's recognize our facilities staff. Keeping the lights on since before most of you were born. Folks like my dad here. A ripple of polite laughter moved through the bleachers. Folks like my dad, like I was part of the folding chairs stacked against the wall. Doris wasn't in the gym. She'd stayed home with a bad hip. I don't think she heard him say it. I want to believe that. I clapped along like everyone else. Inside, something old and quiet woke up. I almost walked out right then. I got as far as my Buick in the parking lot. Keys in the ignition, engine off, hands on the wheel. I sat there a long time. Part of me wanted to just drive home. Forget the whole afternoon. Let David have his laugh, the way I'd let him have 100 small laughs before. I thought about retiring quiet at the end of the year, letting the district be whatever David wanted it to be. Then I thought about a fall 39 years ago. A teacher named Miriam Fitch, who tutored my own struggling son for free every evening, until he could read at grade level. I sat with that memory until it settled something in my chest. I turned the Buick off completely. I walked back inside. David kept talking after I sat back down. He announced the district was reallocating enrichment funding ahead of a state bond referendum that would fund a new athletic complex. A $41 million bond, pending final board approval. He said streamlining legacy programs twice. The crowd nodded like that meant something good. I know what those words mean, coming from a man like David. They mean cutting whatever doesn't show up on a scoreboard. I've watched administrators like him my whole career. They talk about efficiency the way a landlord talks about renovations. Confident, reasonable sounding. Never once mentioning the tenants. I found Rosa near the coat rack after the assembly ended. She didn't smile at me. She said, "Arthur, walk with me." We went to the empty band room down the hall. She pulled a folded memo from her binder. She set it in front of me like it was something dangerous. She said, "David's reallocation plan ends the Kessler Arts and Music Scholarship. All of it. Starting next semester." I stood very still. Rosa didn't rush me. She let the silence sit there as long as it needed to. That's one of the things I've always respected about her. She knows when a man needs a minute before he can talk. The Kessler Scholarship covers instruments, private lessons, and college arts tuition for any student whose family can't afford it. No paperwork, no questions, no committee interviews. It's been running for 29 years. Most people at the district think it's some old alumni endowment that dried up years ago. Most people don't know I fund it myself. I need to back up. 39 years ago, my son David struggled badly in school. He couldn't read past a third grade level in 6th grade. A teacher named Miriam Fitch noticed and stayed late every single evening for a full year, unpaid, until he caught up. She never once billed the district or asked for recognition. I never forgot that a stranger's patience is the only reason my son had any future at all. I spent the next decade saving quiet, a little at a time, the way you'd fill a jar with coins nobody's watching. 29 years ago, that fund had enough to endow a real scholarship. I asked the district to name it simply the Arts and Music Fund. Vague enough that nobody connected the janitor mopping the halls to the man who'd endowed it through a family trust. I liked it that way. Patience shouldn't need applause. My lawyer, a woman named Constance Pruitt, wrote one clause into the endowment trust at my insistence, back when I first set it up. As founding trustee, I retain a permanent seat on the district's foundation board, with veto power over any change to the fund. Nobody at the district office reads founding trust documents from 3 decades ago. David certainly hadn't. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it. It costs you nothing. It means everything to us. Thank you. Genuinely, I went home that night. I told Doris everything. She's 69 now, still sharp enough to beat the whole church at bridge on instinct alone. She listened without interrupting, which for Doris is its own kind of alarm bell. When I finished, she said, "So David wants to cut arts funding for a football stadium." I said, "That's the shape of it. She said, "And he called you folks like his dad in front of the whole town." I said he did. She said, "Well, I hope he enjoys the surprise." Then she went back to her knitting, like we'd just discussed the weather. I didn't sleep much that week. I called Constance Pruitt first thing Monday. She's handled my paperwork for 25 years and doesn't rattle easy. I told her what I'd found. She went quiet, which for Constance is rare. Then she asked one question. "You want to stop it quiet or stop it loud?" I told her I wanted it stopped for good, and I wanted David to understand exactly why, in a room he couldn't spin his way out of. She said, "Then we do this at the full foundation board meeting. On the record, everyone present." I met Constance in her small office above the hardware store on Elm Street. She spread the endowment documents across her desk. She read the veto clause twice, out loud. Slower the second time. She looked up at me and said, "Arthur, do you understand what you're holding here?" I said I thought so. She said, "You're holding the only thing in this district that a superintendent's office can't override." She said the clause was airtight, drafted clean. No ambiguity a district attorney could exploit. I asked her what I should do with it. She said nothing, yet let David build the whole case for cutting that fund. Let him put it in writing, on the record. Then you use it once, and you use it right. Over the next 5 weeks, I did what I've always done. I stayed quiet. I got organized. Constance pulled the original endowment documents, notarized copies, the whole paper trail going back 3 decades. I asked her to schedule the foundation board vote in front of everyone. No shortcuts. No private sign-off. David, thinking it was a formality, agreed right away. I kept working my regular shifts through all of it. I mopped the halls. I fixed the boilers. Rosa brought me coffee every morning and asked why I looked like a man carrying something heavy. I told her it was nothing. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me for a second. But she let it go, because that's what Rosa does. David walked past me twice that month in the hallway. He said morning, Dad, both times, same tone as always, like I was furniture that happened to speak. 2 weeks before the vote, the State Bond Committee toured the school. 4 of them, in matching Navy suits, clipboards in hand. They walked the halls like they already owned them. David led the tour personally. He walked them straight past the music room, no stopping, past the wall of student recital photos. One of the suits asked what that room was for. David said, underutilized space being reassessed. I was fixing a hinge on the door nearby. None of them looked up at me twice. I finished the hinge. I went and sat in my truck a minute, just breathing. My granddaughter Emily called me on a Sunday. She said David had been stressed, working late, talking about a big opportunity that would put the district on the map. I asked if she knew what the opportunity was. She said something about a new stadium, nothing specific. I asked if she was doing all right. She said she was tired, but happy. I didn't tell her what I knew. Some things a grandfather protects for as long as he can. The foundation board meeting landed on a Thursday evening. Same gym as the Centennial Assembly, 5 weeks earlier. 11 board members. Constance as counsel. David at the podium with a slide deck, the State Bond Committee's seal glowing in the corner. I sat in the back row again. Navy uniform. Name patch straight. Same seat as always. Nobody in that room expected me to say a single word. David walked through his plan. Ending the Kessler Scholarship would free up $900,000 a year toward the bond's local match requirement. That would let the stadium project move forward on schedule. He said it would let the district secure the full $41 million instead of a scaled-back version. He said, the numbers simply make more sense this way. Like arithmetic could excuse what it actually meant. A board member near the door, a woman named Louise Tran, asked what happens to students currently enrolled in the scholarship. David said they'd be transitioned to a general aid application process. Louise asked what that process actually looked like. David said his office was still finalizing that framework. Everyone in that room knew what that phrase meant. Nobody said it out loud. Constance stood up. She said, "Before this vote proceeds, there's a matter of standing I need to raise." She looked at me. She said, "The Kessler Arts and Music Scholarship was established under a binding trust with a permanent founding trustee veto clause. That trustee is in this room." David laughed. Actually laughed, before he understood what she meant. He said, "Constance, the Kessler family fund's been dormant for years. There's no active trustee." Constance slid the notarized documents across the table. She said, "The founding trustee is Arthur Kessler." The room went quiet in a way I've only heard once before. The evening Miriam Fitch told me my son could finally read a full page on his own. David turned around in his chair. He looked at me the way you look at a fire alarm going off inside your own living room. I stood up. I walked to the front of the gym, past the slide deck with its clean charts, past the State Bond Committee's seal glowing on the screen. I said, "My name is Arthur Kessler. I've worked in this building for 38 years. I fixed the wiring in this exact gym 11 years ago." I let that sit a second. Then I said, 39 years ago, a teacher gave my own son her evenings for free until he could read. Nobody billed us. Nobody asked for credit. I built this scholarship so no other child would have to depend on luck, the way my son did." David's face had gone the color of the memo Rosa handed me in the band room. He said, "Dad, I didn't know." I said, "No, you didn't." I said, "You called me folks like my dad in front of the whole town. You never once wondered who I actually was." I said, "That's not an accident. That's a habit. You don't ask questions about people you've already decided don't matter." I turned to the board. I said, "As founding trustee, I am formally exercising my veto." I said, "This is over the elimination of the Kessler Arts and Music Scholarship." I said, "That fund stays fully endowed, exactly as it has for 29 years. Then I looked at the Bond Committee's seal on the screen. I said, "If this stadium needs $900,000 taken out of a child's violin lessons, the math is wrong." I said, "Find $41 million somewhere that isn't a kid's only chance at music." Louise asked David directly whether his own performance bonus was tied to the bond's approval timeline. David said the structure was standard district incentive practice. He didn't say no. Another board member asked when he'd learned about my role in the trust. David said he hadn't known until that moment. Louise asked whether he'd read the endowment documents before proposing the cut at all. David didn't answer that one. His silence answered every question better than any word could have. Nobody clapped. Nobody laughed. Constance closed her folder. The quiet click sounded louder than applause. The board voted 10-1 against the elimination. David was the one. Within a month, the board opened a review into how the bond timeline had been tied to administrative incentives. They wanted to know if David's bonus depended on the scholarship ending. It did. David resigned as superintendent before the review concluded. Nobody forced him out in public. I made sure of that. I didn't want a spectacle. I wanted the scholarship safe and the truth on record. I got both. Rosa wasn't allowed to speak at the meeting, but she was waiting in the hallway with 2 other staff members when the doors opened. Word travels fast at Ridgeview. She told me later that Louise Tran walked out first. Louise stopped in front of the 3 of them. She said only, "The scholarship stays funded. Ask Arthur Kessler about it sometime." Rosa said she had to sit down in a hallway chair for a minute. She said she'd known me 15 years and never once suspected. I told her that was rather the point of the whole arrangement. 2 weeks before that, Emily had mentioned her father was under a lot of pressure lately. I hadn't asked why. I regret that now. A grandfather should ask why, even when the answer is complicated. Emily called me that same week. She was furious, but not at me. She said, "Grandpa, why didn't you tell me any of this? Not the trust, not the fund, not what he was planning?" I told her the truth. I said I didn't know how to tell my own grandchild that her father would cut arts funding for a bonus. I said I didn't know how she'd take hearing it from me, instead of seeing it herself. She was quiet a long moment. Then she said, "You should have trusted me sooner." She was right. I told her so. David tried calling me twice, in the weeks after. I let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was an apology, stiff and rehearsed, the kind a man writes down before he says it. The second was shorter. He just said, "I hope you're proud of me somewhere in there." I didn't call him back either time. Some apologies are for the person giving them, not the person receiving them. I let him have that one on his own. David and his wife separated 4 months later, though I never learned the full reason and never asked. I didn't push for any of it. I never said a word against him to Emily, not once, even when I had every right to. Some things a father has to let his son arrive at on his own. He came around faster than I expected once the numbers went public. Students at the school started thanking him by name in the hallways, not knowing how close he'd come to taking their scholarships away. The morning after the vote, I got to school at 6 like always. I mopped the front hall, same bucket, same worn handle. A young music teacher I'd never spoken to before stopped in the doorway. She said, "Are you Mr. Kessler, the founder?" I said I was. She said one of her students had gotten a full ride to a state conservatory through the scholarship, the first in his family to attend college at all. She said she just wanted to shake my hand. I shook it. Then I went and fixed a squeaky locker down the hall. That locker had been squeaking for a week. It wasn't going to fix itself just because a board vote happened. The Kessler Arts and Music Scholarship is still running. It funded 18 students last year. No bills. No questions. Constance had a small plaque installed outside the music room a few weeks after the vote. It doesn't say Kessler Family Estate anymore. It says, simply, founded in patience, maintained in quiet. I still mop the halls. I still wear the Navy uniform. David, when I see him now, mostly at Emily's school recitals, nods and says Dad in a different tone than before. It's a small thing. It cost him something to learn it. I let him keep the dignity of learning it quietly, the same way I kept my own dignity quiet for 29 years. Doris asked me, the night after the vote, whether I felt vindicated. I told her I mostly just felt tired and hungry and glad it was over. She made me pot roast, the same one she's made every hard Thursday for 40 years. We ate at our kitchen table. My cracked pocket knife sat on the counter, right where it always sits. She said, "You know, for a man who spent 29 years hiding how much he'd endowed, you sure do keep a cracked pocket knife." I told her some things you keep on purpose. She said that was the most Arthur Kessler sentence I'd ever spoken. Then she went back to her knitting. Rosa still brings coffee every morning, still complaining about the parking lot potholes. Constance still runs board meetings with the same quiet precision she always has. The music room still has its lights on every evening. It's the same room I fixed the wiring in, 11 years before anyone in that gym found out who I really was. Miriam Fitch is 91 now, still living in the same small apartment near the school. I visit her every month. I told her, after the vote, what her patience had grown into over the years. She cried at her kitchen table, the same way I once cried at mine. She said she barely remembered tutoring my son. She said she'd tutored a lot of kids over the years, for free, because that's just what she did. I told her one of them built a scholarship in her honor without her even knowing it. She said that was the nicest thing anyone had ever told her. A reporter from the local paper called Constance's office, asking for an interview with the mystery donor. Constance asked me if I wanted to talk to them. I said no. She told the reporter the donor preferred to remain private, and that the story was really about the students the scholarship serves, not about him. The paper ran it that way. One paragraph, no name, no photo. I read it once at my kitchen table and folded it into a drawer. Some things don't need my face attached to them, they just need to keep working. Constance told me later that Louise Tran pulled her aside after the vote. Louise said she'd sat on that board 7 years. She said she'd never once seen a district proposal actually stopped, not delayed, not softened, stopped cold. She asked Constance how long she'd known who I was. Constance said, longer than I was allowed to say. Louise laughed at that, the first laugh anyone had managed all evening. She said she was going to start looking a lot closer at every custodian she passed in that building from now on. Constance told her that was probably a good policy in general. An independent auditor named Felix Ochoa